I remember the day Lauren vanished as if it were carved into my memory. It was a cold, snowy winter morning. The kind of morning where the snowflakes fell slowly, almost lazily, covering the ground in a thick white blanket. The sky was gray, and the world seemed hushed, as if holding its breath. Lauren was up early, bustling around the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the house. She was dressed smartly in her best wool suit and winter coat. She had an important meeting with a supplier in the city, something about securing better prices for the farm's produce. "Robert," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I'll be back by evening. Make sure Emily has her breakfast, and don't let her spend all day in front of the TV." I looked up from my newspaper, trying to mask the worry I felt. "I'll handle it, Lauren. Just be careful on those icy roads." She walked over, kissed me on the forehead, and then went to Emily's room. I could hear the murmur of their voices, followed by Emily's sleepy giggle. A few minutes later, Lauren was back in the kitchen, grabbing her keys and bag. "I love you," she said, giving me one last kiss. "I love you too," I replied, trying to push away the uneasy feeling in my gut. With that, she was out the door. I watched from the window as she carefully navigated the driveway, the tires crunching on the snow. And then she was gone, swallowed by the swirling white. The hours passed slowly. I busied myself with chores, trying to keep my mind off the growing sense of dread. By noon, there was still no word from Lauren. I called her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I told myself she was just busy, that she'd call as soon as she had a chance. By late afternoon, my worry had turned to fear. Emily sensed it too. She kept asking when Mommy would be home, her big brown eyes full of concern. I tried to reassure her, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the snow, I knew something was terribly wrong. I called the police, my hands trembling as I dialed the number. "Hello, this is Robert Thompson. My wife, Lauren, she left for the city this morning and hasn't come back. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. I'm really worried. Can you help?" The officer on the other end was calm and professional. "Mr. Thompson, we'll need some more details. Can you tell us what she was wearing, what vehicle she was driving, and the route she was taking?" I provided all the information I could, my voice shaking. After hanging up, I sat by the phone, staring at it as if willing it to ring with good news. It wasn't until the next morning that the call came, a police officer's voice on the line, grave and somber. They had found Lauren's truck. It was submerged in the icy river, just a few miles from the meeting site. The driver's side door was wrenched open, and her purse was abandoned on the passenger seat. There was no sign of Lauren. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest. Emily, who had been listening, let out a small broken cry. I gathered her into my arms, holding her close as tears streamed down both our faces. "Dad, where's Mommy? Is she coming back?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper, full of fear and confusion. I swallowed hard, trying to find the words. "I hope no, sweetie, but we have to believe she's out there somewhere. And we won't stop looking for her. Not ever." We sat there, clinging to each other, as the world outside seemed to fall away. In that moment, all that mattered was finding Lauren and bringing her home. The days ahead would be filled with uncertainty and heartache, but I knew we had to stay strong for each other. For Lauren. The search and rescue teams combed the frigid waters and surrounding woods for days, but no trace of Lauren was ever found. The pain of not knowing, the endless questions with no answers, gnawed at me. But I had to keep going. For Emily. For the farm. For the hope that someday, somehow, Lauren would come back to us. The days after Lauren's disappearance were the hardest of my life. Each morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a bad dream. But her side of the bed was always cold and empty. The farmhouse, once filled with the sounds of laughter and life, felt eerily quiet. Even the animals seemed to sense something was wrong. Emily and I tried to keep our routine. It was the only way to hold on to some sense of normalcy. She would get ready for school while I prepared breakfast, though neither of us had much appetite. One morning, a few weeks after Lauren vanished, Emily sat at the kitchen table, poking at her cereal. I could see the sadness in her eyes, and it broke my heart. "Dad, do you think Mommy is scared?" she asked softly, not looking up from her bowl. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know, sweetie, but I believe she's trying to find her way back to us, and we have to stay strong for her." Emily nodded, but her eyes were still filled with doubt. She had always been a sensitive child, and this was more than any 8-year-old should have to bear. After dropping Emily at school, I headed to the farm. The work was grueling, but it was a welcome distraction. The fields needed tending, and the animals needed care. But every task, every chore, reminded me of Lauren. She had always been there, her laughter and warmth filling the spaces between work and rest. One afternoon, I was fixing a broken fence when John, our neighbor, pulled up in his truck. He got out and walked over, his face etched with concern. "Hey, Robert," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "How are you holding up?" I wiped the sweat from my brow and forced a smile. "I'm managing, John. Just trying to keep things running." John nodded, his eyes full of empathy. "If you need anything, you know where to find me. The whole town is here for you and Emily." "Thanks, John. I appreciate it," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. As the days turned into weeks, the farm became both a refuge and a burden. It kept me busy, but it also held too many memories of Lauren. Emily and I fell into a rhythm, a way of coping with our grief. She threw herself into her schoolwork, and I worked longer hours, trying to keep the farm afloat. One evening, after a particularly tough day, Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. The sky was a canvas of pink and orange, and for a moment, it felt like Lauren was there with us, in the beauty of the evening. "Dad," Emily said, her voice breaking the silence, "do you think we'll ever see Mommy again?" I looked at her, my heart aching for the right words. "I hope so, Emily. I really do. But no matter what, we have each other, and we'll get through this together." Emily leaned against me, and I wrapped my arm around her, drawing her close. We sat there, watching the stars come out one by one, finding comfort in each other's presence. The pain of Lauren's absence never went away, but we learned to live with it. We found strength in our routines, in the support of our friends and neighbors, and in the love we shared. And though the road ahead was uncertain, we faced it together, with hope and determination. Every night before I went to bed, I would whisper a silent prayer for Lauren, wherever she was. I hoped she could feel our love, guiding her back to us. And I promised myself that I would never stop searching, never stop hoping, until our family was whole again. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the whispers began. In a small town like ours, news traveled fast, and rumors spread even faster. At first, people were sympathetic. They brought casseroles, offered help on the farm, and kept us in their prayers. But as the search for Lauren yielded no results, sympathy turned into speculation. One morning, I stopped by the local diner to grab a cup of coffee. As soon as I walked in, I felt the eyes on me. Conversations hushed, and I could hear the low murmur of voices. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of their stares. "Hey, Robert," called out Sam, the diner owner. He was a big man with a kind heart, and he had known our family for years. "How are you holding up?" I forced a smile and nodded. "Doing the best I can, Sam. Just taking it one day at a time." Sam handed me my coffee, and I could see the concern in his eyes. "If you need anything, you just let me know, all right?" "Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it," I replied, taking my coffee and heading to a booth in the corner. As I sipped my coffee, I overheard a conversation from the next table. Two older women, Mrs. Jenkins and Mrs. Carter, were talking in hushed tones. "Did you hear about Lauren?" Mrs. Jenkins whispered, leaning closer to her friend. Mrs. Carter nodded, her eyes wide with curiosity. I heard she ran off with that city slicker, Tony. Can you believe it? Poor Robert and Emily. My grip tightened on the coffee cup, and my heart pounded in my chest. It took every ounce of self-control to stay seated and not confront them. Instead, I took a deep breath and focused on the warmth of the coffee in my hands. Later that day, I was working on the tractor when John, my neighbor, stopped by again. He leaned against the fence, watching me for a moment before speaking. "Robert, you should know that folks are talking," he said, his voice low and serious. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at him. "I know, John. I've heard the rumors, but they're not true. Lauren wouldn't do that. She wouldn't leave Emily and me like that." John nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "I believe you, Robert, but you know how people are. They need answers, and when they don't get them, they make up their own stories." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. "It's just so hard, John, not knowing where she is or what happened to her. And now, having to deal with these lies on top of everything else." John stepped closer and put a hand on my shoulder. "Hang in there, buddy. The truth will come out eventually. Just keep your head up and stay strong for Emily." That evening, as I was helping Emily with her homework, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes of hers. "Dad, why do people think Mommy ran away?" she asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Sometimes, when people don't know the whole story, they make up their own version of it. They don't understand what really happened, so they guess and gossip. But we know the truth, Emily, and that's all that matters. Emily nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "I miss her so much, Dad. I just want her to come home." "I miss her too, sweetie," I said, pulling her into a hug. "More than anything. But we have to believe that she's out there, trying to find her way back to us." As I held Emily close, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let the rumors and whispers break us. I would keep searching for Lauren, no matter how long it took. And I would protect Emily from the harshness of the world, giving her the love and support she needed to get through this difficult time. The days ahead were uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. As long as we had each other, we could face whatever came our way. And with every sunrise, I held on to the hope that one day, Lauren would walk through that door and make our family whole again. 2 years had passed since Lauren vanished, and life had settled into a painful routine. Emily and I had learned to navigate our new normal, but the weight of Lauren's absence was always there, a shadow over our days. One crisp autumn morning, I decided it was time for a change of scenery. Emily needed a break, and so did I. We packed a picnic and decided to visit a nearby town, known for its quaint streets and historic sites. The drive through the countryside was beautiful, the trees a riot of reds and golds. As we approached the town, Emily was unusually quiet, staring out the window. I reached over and patted her knee. "You okay, sweetie?" I asked, glancing at her. She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the scenery. "Yeah, Dad. I just miss Mom. She would have loved this." My heart ached at her words, but I forced a smile. "She would have, Emily. And she's with us in spirit, always." We parked the car and started exploring the town. Emily's mood lifted as we wandered through the cobblestone streets, visiting little shops and cafes. We ended up at a small park with a beautiful old church at one end and a stone bench under a big oak tree. "Dad, can we sit for a bit?" Emily asked, pointing to the bench. "Sure," I said, taking her hand as we walked over. We sat down, enjoying the crisp air and the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. Suddenly, Emily's hand tightened around mine. "Dad, look," she whispered urgently, her eyes wide with shock. I followed her gaze to the church entrance. There, sitting on the stone steps, was a nun. She was dressed in a simple black and white habit, her chestnut hair peeking out from under her wimple. My breath caught in my throat as I realized who it was. "Lauren," I whispered, hardly daring to believe my eyes. Emily was already on her feet, running towards her. "Mom, Mom," she cried, her voice echoing through the quiet park. Lauren looked up, her eyes widening in shock as she saw Emily racing towards her. She stood up slowly, as if in a dream, and opened her arms just as Emily flung herself into them. "Mommy," Emily sobbed, clinging to her. Lauren held her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my sweet Emily, my baby girl," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I stumbled towards them, my legs feeling like lead. When I reached them, I enveloped both Lauren and Emily in my arms, holding them as if I could never let go. "Lauren, how?" I started, my voice breaking. She looked up at me, her emerald eyes filled with tears. "Robert, I don't know where to begin. I've missed you both so much." We sat back down on the bench, holding each other, afraid to break the spell. Emily snuggled in Lauren's lap, while I sat close, holding Lauren's hand. Over the next few hours, Lauren told us her incredible story. How Tony had forced her truck off the bridge, leaving her for dead. How she had managed to escape the icy river and was found by the nuns from the nearby monastery. I had no memory of who I was, Lauren said, her voice trembling. The trauma, the cold, it all left me with nothing but my first name. The nuns took me in, cared for me, and over time, fragments of my memory started to return. Tears streamed down my face as I listened, holding her hand tightly. "Lauren, we never stopped looking for you. We never gave up hope." She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with love and regret. "I know, Robert. I felt it. And I'm so sorry for everything you and Emily have gone through. I wanted to come back, but the fear and the confusion, it was paralyzing." Emily looked up, her eyes bright with tears. "Mommy, promise you'll never leave us again." Lauren hugged her tightly. "I promise, my sweet girl. I'm here now, and I'm never leaving again." As the sun set over the park, casting a golden glow over us, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The road ahead would be challenging, but we were together again. And that was all that mattered. The rumors, the whispers, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the miracle of finding Lauren, the strength of our family, and the hope for a brighter future. As we walked back to the car, hand in hand, I knew that we could face anything as long as we had each other. We drove home from the park in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Emily clung to Lauren, refusing to let go of her hand, as if afraid she might disappear again. I kept glancing at them through the rearview mirror, still unable to fully grasp the miracle of our reunion. When we got home, the familiar sight of our farmhouse, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, felt different. It was as if a piece of the puzzle had been missing all this time, and now it was finally in place. We settled into the kitchen, where the warmth and comfort of home seemed to wrap around us like a blanket. "Robert, Emily," Lauren began, her voice shaky. "I need to tell you everything. It's not an easy story to hear, but you both deserve to know the truth." Emily and I nodded, bracing ourselves for what was to come. Lauren took a deep breath and began her tale. "The day I disappeared, I was on my way to meet the supplier, just as planned. But Tony, your business manager, was waiting for me. He'd been embezzling money from the farm for months, and I had unknowingly stumbled upon his secret. He couldn't risk me exposing him." Emily's eyes widened. "Tony, the one who used to bring us chocolates?" Lauren nodded sadly. "Yes, sweetheart, that Tony. He forced my truck off the bridge at gunpoint. I thought I was going to die that day. The truck plunged into the icy river, and I was trapped. Somehow, I managed to free myself and swim to shore, but the cold and shock were too much. I collapsed on the riverbank, and that's when the nuns found me. I could feel the anger rising in me, my fists clenching at my sides. "Why didn't you come back to us, Lauren? Why didn't you tell someone?" Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to, Robert, but the trauma left me with no memory of who I was or where I belonged. The nuns took me in, cared for me, and gave me a safe place to heal. Slowly, fragments of my memory began to return, but it wasn't until I saw Emily in the park that everything came rushing back. Emily hugged Lauren tightly. "Mommy, I'm so glad you're home. I missed you so much." Lauren kissed the top of Emily's head. "I missed you too, my brave girl. More than words can say." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of Lauren's story sinking in. The shock of Tony's betrayal, the pain of her lost years, and the miracle of her survival. It was a lot to process. "There's more," Lauren said quietly, breaking the silence. "Tony didn't just embezzle money. He had debts, dangerous debts, and he knew that if I exposed him, it wouldn't just be his job on the line. It would be his life." My anger turned to a cold, hard determination. "We need to go to the police, Lauren. They need to know everything." Lauren nodded. "I know, Robert. I want to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. But right now, I just want to hold my family and be grateful that we're together again." Emily looked up at me with her big brown eyes. "Dad, will we be safe now?" I hugged both Lauren and Emily tightly. "Yes, Emily. We'll make sure of it. As long as we're together, we can face anything." That night, as we sat around the dinner table, the warmth of our reunited family filled the room. The future was uncertain, but we had each other, and that was all that mattered. The next morning, we went to the police station and told them everything. The officers were shocked by Lauren's story and immediately launched an investigation into Tony's whereabouts. It would take time, but justice would be served. In the days that followed, our small town buzzed with the news of Lauren's return and the truth about Tony. The whispers and rumors faded, replaced by relief and support from our neighbors. The farm, once a place of heartache, began to feel like home again. As we worked side by side to rebuild our lives, I realized that the love and strength of our family could overcome anything. Lauren's return was a miracle, and it gave us the hope and determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With each passing day, the wounds of the past began to heal, and as we looked to the future, we did so with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper appreciation for the precious gift of family. The days following Lauren's return were a mix of joy and struggle. We were a family again, but the scars of the past 2 years ran deep. Rebuilding trust and healing old wounds would take time and patience. Lauren and I spent a lot of time talking, trying to bridge the gap that had grown between us. There were so many things we needed to say, so many feelings to untangle. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, we sat on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around us. "Robert," Lauren began, her voice soft, "I know it's not going to be easy. I've been gone for so long, and I can't imagine how hard it's been for you and Emily." I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. "It's been tough, Lauren, but the hardest part was not knowing if you were alive, if you were okay. And then the rumors, they nearly broke me." Lauren reached out and took my hand. "I can't change what happened, but I promise you, Robert, I'm here now. And I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." I squeezed her hand, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering doubt. "We can get through this, Lauren. We just have to take it one day at a time." The next morning, we sat down with Emily to talk about what had happened and what lay ahead. Emily had been strong, but she needed reassurance and love to heal from the confusion and fear of the past 2 years. "Emily," I said gently, "Mom and I are here for you. We're a family, and we're going to stick together no matter what." Emily looked at both of us, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I just want things to be like they were before, when we were happy." Lauren pulled her close, hugging her tightly. "We will be happy again, Emily. It might take some time, but we'll get there. I promise." Rebuilding trust with the people in our town was another challenge. The rumors had done their damage, and some folks still cast suspicious glances our way. But slowly, as Lauren and I shared our story, and showed our commitment to each other and the farm. The gossip began to fade. One Saturday, we decided to host a small gathering at the farm. It was a way to reconnect with our neighbors and show them that we were moving forward. We set up tables in the yard, and Lauren baked her famous apple pies, filling the air with a sweet, comforting aroma. As people started to arrive, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. But then I saw Emily running around with her friends, laughing and playing, and I knew we were doing the right thing. John and his wife, Mary, were among the first to arrive. John clapped me on the back, a big grin on his face. "It's good to see you folks out and about again, Robert. We've missed you." Mary hugged Lauren, her eyes shining with tears. "Welcome back, Lauren. We're so glad you're safe." Lauren smiled, a mix of gratitude and relief in her expression. "Thank you, Mary. It feels good to be home." As the evening went on, the atmosphere grew warmer, and the tension began to melt away. People shared stories, laughed, and enjoyed the food. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of normalcy returning. Later, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, I stood with Lauren and Emily, watching the stars come out. Emily leaned against me, her small hand holding mine tightly. "Dad, are we really going to be okay?" she asked softly. I looked at her, then at Lauren, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, Emily, we're going to be just fine. We have each other, and that's all we need." Lauren smiled, her eyes filled with love. "We're stronger together. And as long as we have that, we can face anything." The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew we were on the right path. We had faced our fears, confronted the past, and come out stronger on the other side. Together, we could rebuild not just our farm, but our lives. And with each passing day, we would create new memories, forging a future filled with love, trust, and hope. As winter melted into spring, our lives began to settle into a new rhythm. The farm, once a place of sorrow and longing, started to feel like home again. The fields were green with new growth, and the air was filled with the promise of fresh starts and brighter days. Lauren and I worked side by side, tending to the crops and caring for the animals. Emily was always nearby, helping out when she could and filling the air with her laughter. Each day brought small victories and moments of joy that reminded us of how far we had come. One sunny afternoon, Lauren and I were planting new seedlings in the garden when Emily ran up to us, her face flushed with excitement. "Dad, Mom, guess what?" she exclaimed, nearly out of breath. "What is it, sweetie?" Lauren asked, smiling at her enthusiasm. Emily held up a piece of paper. "I got an A on my science project. Miss Stevens said it was the best in the class." I beamed with pride. "That's fantastic, Emily. I knew you could do it." Lauren knelt down and hugged her tightly. "I'm so proud of you, honey. You've worked so hard." Emily grinned, her eyes shining. "Thanks, Mom. I wanted to make you both proud." As Emily ran off to show her friends, Lauren and I exchanged a look filled with love and shared memories. "She's growing up so fast," Lauren said softly, a hint of sadness in her voice. I nodded, feeling the same mix of pride and nostalgia. "She is, but she's turning into an amazing young girl. And a lot of that is because of you." Lauren smiled, her eyes misty. "And because of you too, Robert. We've both been through so much, but we did it together." We continued working in the garden, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields, we gathered around the dinner table. The meal was simple but hearty, filled with the bounty of our labor. "Mom, can we go for a walk after dinner?" Emily asked, her eyes hopeful. "Of course, Emily," Lauren replied, glancing at me. "A walk sounds perfect." After we finished eating, we set out along the familiar paths that wound through our property. The air was warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers. Emily ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the trees. As we walked hand in hand, Lauren leaned her head on my shoulder. I've missed this, Robert, just being together as a family. I squeezed her hand, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Me too, Lauren, more than anything. But we're here now, and that's what matters. We reached a small hill that overlooked the farm and sat down, watching the stars come out one by one. Emily curled up between us, her head resting on my lap. Dad, can we make a wish? She asked, looking up at the twinkling sky. Sure, Emily. Close your eyes and make a wish, I said, wrapping my arm around her. We sat there in silence for a moment, each of us lost in our thoughts and wishes. I wished for our family to stay strong and happy, for our farm to thrive, and for the shadows of the past to fade away. What did you wish for? Emily asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. I smiled down at her. I wished for us to always be together and happy. Me too, she said, snuggling closer. Lauren kissed the top of Emily's head. That's the best wish of all. As we sat there, under the blanket of stars, I realized that we had been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild, to love, and to create new memories. The road had been long and difficult, but it had brought us to this moment, and for that, I was grateful. Our new beginnings were filled with hope and promise. We had faced the darkness and come out stronger on the other side. Together, we could face whatever the future held, and with each new day, we would continue to build a life filled with love, trust, and joy.